Hello, and welcome to SpindlerAcademy.com. Today we're going to be talking about scientific notation. So what is scientific notation? Well, the reason that we have it is that it was created to describe very, very large and very, very small numbers. So, if you just have the number 1 or 2 or 4 or whatever, you can write that out easily. But if you have a really big number like 1 and a bunch of zeros, that's a pain to write out. So we created this notation to describe those sorts of numbers. And it's also known as the standard notation or the standard form. But before I talk more about scientific notation and do some examples, I want to talk about exponents because you need to understand exponents in order to fully understand the scientific notation. So an exponent is the act of repeated multiplication. So for example, we have the number 3 and we multiply it by itself. We write that as 3 squared, or 3 to the 2. And that of course equals 9. You can do, if you don't believe me, 3 times 3 equals 9. And that's because 3 sets of 3 equals 9 things total. And we could also do 3 to the 2, and that equals 9, obviously. And so if we add another 3 into the multiplication list, then we write that as 3 to the 3, and that equals 27. So 3, I'll just do one of them, to the 3 equals 27. And of course we can do 3 to the 4 to the 4, and that equals 81. So you get the idea. If you multiply things together, numbers together, that's called, you can write it as an exponent, and then you can calculate that exponent. And the base is referring to the number 3 in this case, and the exponent in this one at least is the number 4. So, but those are not tied to it's not always going to be 3 or always going to be 4. The base can change. And so in scientific notation, we use a base of 10. So 10 to the 1 is equal to 10. 10 to the 2 would be 10 times 10, and that equals 100. I didn't write it here just because it's obvious. 10 to the 3 equals 1,000. 10 to the 10 is, what is that? That's 10 billion. Yeah, 10 billion. So then I have a question for you, and you can just pause it here if you want to think about it, or I'll just say the answer. But what is 10 to the negative 1? Well, one way to think about this is, or to kind of derive the answer, is it's the opposite of the multiplication. So, and that might not have made sense, but multiplication and division are opposites, right? So since we know that 10 to the 3 is 1,000, and we know that 10 to the 2 is 100, and we multiply by 10 to get there, then if we go the opposite direction, it's division by 10. So to get, I guess I should add 10 to the 0 here, and that equals 1. Whoops. And we know that because 10 divided by 10, if we're going in this direction, technically this should be up here, and then this one should theoretically be even higher. So then this equals 1, and we can see that it's just a division by 10. So then the next step, since we're going that way, is going to be another division by 10 again. So it equals 0.1, because 1, whoops, not 4, 1 divided by 10 is 0.1. So that's the answer to that. And so you can kind of see how multiplication and division work in terms of exponents. So then let's do, okay, you might be asking, what is scientific notation exactly? Well, let's try changing the mode of our scientific calculator to scientific notation. Of our graphing calculator to scientific notation. and I'm going to put in the number 123.456. And we get this answer. And you might be asking, what is E? Well, E just represents times 10 to the, and then this number. So in this case, what we got was 1.23456 E, and what is it, 2. So what that means is when it says E, what it's really saying is 1.23456 times 10 to the 2. And that's the same as this number, because we just take this decimal point and we move it over to the right 2 places, and that's the same as multiplying by 10 squared, or by 100. So all that E really means is times 10 to the, and then whatever the number that follows the E is the exponent. So then let's do some examples. So (2e3). Oh, and if you're in like a class or like a math class, they don't want you to write E. That's just what's shown on the calculator. But just for this case, for my purposes, it makes sense to write E because it's quicker. But if you're answering a question on like a test or something, don't write E, write times 10 to the exponent. So 2e3 plus 3e3. So in this case, these are the same. The exponents are the same. So we can just add these two numbers together. So it's 5. 2 plus 3 is 5, E3, and that's our answer. And I can check that, see if I did it wrong. I don't think I did, but 2 second. Oh, and then I don't know if you can see it. Well, you might need to watch the HD version of this, but there's a little blue, and it's hard to read because it's on gray, but it says capital E, and you have to get to that by pressing second, and then the second E. And don't confuse it with the letter or the number E that's over here, and that is a different number altogether. So 2e3 plus 3 second E3 and parentheses, and yep, it's 5e3. Okay, so that's that answer. Next one is 4e5 minus 2e3. So in this case, the exponents are not equivalent, or they're not the same. So what we need to do is make them the same. So 4e5, oh, I might have to think about this one for a second. You can also write this number. There's a lot of, in scientific notation, usually you write the number, it's just one decimal place, and then any following numbers that you need. But you could also write it theoretically as 400 E3, and those will be the same. So if I write 4 second E5, and that gives me 45. But if I write 400 second E3, you'll notice that that's also 4e5, and those are equivalent because the decimal place, or the period, is right here. And so that's almost like writing 4, well, okay, 4e, you can't really say multiple e's, but it'd be like writing times 10 to the 2 times 10 to 3. So that's why those are equivalent. So basically, sorry, that, okay. 400 e to the 3, I'm getting sidetracked, 400 e to the 3 minus 2 e to the 3. So that's 400 minus 2, so that's 398. So 398, and since those were the same, we can say e to the 3. But then 398 is larger than the number 10, and usually with the number to the left of the e, you want it to be under 10, so you want it to be like 3.98. So to get to that number, we want it to be 3.98 e, and then if we move the decimal place over 2 decimal places to the left, then that means we've multiplied by 1 over 100. And so that means, I think it's 5. Let me check that though. 398 second e 3. Yeah, it's 5. So that's the answer. And that's subtraction in scientific notation. And then finally, I'm going to do a multiplication and a division problem in scientific notation. So 4e5 times 3e negative 1. And you'll notice that in this case, the exponents are not the same. But we're doing multiplication, you have to remember. So in multiplication, what you do is you multiply the 4 and the 3, so that's 12. And then what you do is you add the 5 and the negative 1 if you're doing multiplication. So e4. But then that number isn't, again, this is greater than 10, and we want it to be like 1.2 is the idea. So then it's 1.2 e5. No, wait. What did we do in the last one? We moved it over to the left 2, so we added 2. We moved it over to the left 1, so we add 1. So yeah, 5. And I can check that too. 12 second e4 is 1.2 e5. And I'll check the actual calculation. So 4 second e5 times 3 second e, whoops, what did we get j from? E, oh, I accidentally hit alpha, there we go. E negative 1. Oh, I can't do a negative 1 on this calculator. 3e, yeah, because I can't type this negative, because if you were wondering, I have to type under the number to get it to work because there's like a gap here. I guess I can retype. Okay, 4 minus 5 equals, that's negative 1, and then now I have to retype this. So 4 second e5 times 3 second e oh, it didn't work. Let's try that. Yeah, 1.2 e5. Okay, so that worked. And then lastly, we're going to do 6e8 and divided by 3e5. So what you do is you do the division of 6 over 3, so that's 2. And then for the exponents, you go 8 minus 5 because you're doing division. And that's 3. And we'll check that. So, excuse me, 6 e8 divided by 3e5. And it's 2e3, yeah. So that has been Scientific Notation by SpindlerAcademy.com. I hope you found that somewhat helpful. But yeah, basically, yeah, that's scientific notation. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye.